How's it going, friends, and welcome to episode 11 of the Cynical Den Podcast. I finally picked up Darkest Dungeon, and you know, I think it's the perfect game to lift your spirits. Certainly not an extremely grim game that puts you on edge when every member of your party goes insane. In all seriousness, I love this game. I've been digging the hell out of it. I love the Lovecraft, wow, that coming out well. I love the Lovecraftian atmosphere and aesthetics. Those in particular are really cool. I tend to like these games with permadeath. I think it's the same reason why XCOM 2 was one of my favorite games of 2016. I like to play a game where you get into a situation that really puts you on edge because you know that the consequences are lasting. You know, once they're dead, or once one of your players is dead, they're dead for good. Of course, in XCOM 2, you could very easily reload a previous save, and I must admit, I did that more than a few times when I didn't want one of my favorite characters to get killed. I guess Darkest Dungeon is better in that respect because once you screw something up, you can't reload the previous save because it has a very strict auto-saving system. In fact, I think right at the beginning of the game, they were like, yeah, this is a strict auto-saving system because they knew that there'd be people like me who'd be going back to previous saves to revert those errors. I've been getting a lot better at it now, though, in terms of dealing with the consequences. I know that this happened a few times in Civilization 6, where I'd be playing, made a mistake, and went, well, shit, I didn't want to do that. But then I just decided, nah, I'm not gonna go back and revert to a previous save because I don't think it's good to try and game the system within the game. You'll notice this a lot with lots of games where you're basically constantly hitting quick save every time you get to a save position because when you make a mistake, you know you're going to revert that save because you want to game the system. It's one of the huge disconnects in some games where the game is designed in such a way that you're going outside of the game's rules to basically cheat the game. In other words, don't allow the gamer to manually save because they will use it to game the system. We've been doing it for years. Over the past few weeks, I've had the mispleasure of talking to a few fanboys, namely PlayStation fanboys. I suppose it's a little bit of a refreshing change considering for the last few years it's been almost consistently nonsense from Xbox fanboys. But I must admit, it brings up bad memories of early, you know, N4G in 2012, 2013, and 2014 in particular. N4G was a cesspit for PlayStation fanboys who got irrationally angry at people for expressing what turned out to be legitimate concerns about, in particular, the Order 1886. So many people were blindly saying, yeah, no, this game's gonna be great. Why is everybody gunning for it to fail? It wasn't that people were gunning for it to fail, it's that the game looked like horse shit, and it turned out to be completely true. I wonder how many of the people who started insulting me on that website have retracted those claims, because at this stage, anybody who says, no, the Order 1886 was a good game they're fooling themselves. That game was terrible. Even the people who said it was mediocre, and this included me when it first came out, I think they're still giving the game a lot more credit than it deserved. That game is one of the most linear, most narrow games I've ever played in my entire life. So rarely does a game bore me that much. So rarely does a game insult my intelligence to where they don't trust me opening a door or just walking down a narrow hallway, which happens many times, but even then, they'll still take control away from you. And that stealth mission, it sold it for me that this was one of the worst games of the generation so far. I got into it and my immediate thought was, yeah, if you get detected, you immediately die, don't you? This is not going to be a proper stealth section where if you get detected, you have a chance to actually remedy the situation. You get detected, I'm gonna die, aren't I? And long and behold, they shine a flashlight at you, and Super Soldier, whose name I can't even remember, gets his head blown off. Game of the fucking year, right? Back on track, these debates, and I use that term very loosely, have mainly revolved around this argument of port begging. For those of you who don't know this argument, because it could hardly be classified as one, port begging is where PC gamers, and I only look at PC gamers, will beg for console games to be released on their platform, and this means I still don't know. I've yet to see anybody explain how that means that PC gaming is bad, which I'm guessing is what the argument is. Because other than that, I don't see why it gets brought up. They ask for games, therefore PC gaming is bad. Because that doesn't connect. That doesn't make any sense. Just because they're asking for games doesn't mean they don't have games on the platform. And again, I think it's important to drive home just how few PC gamers actually do this. The largest petition I saw had about 52,000 signatures for Red Dead Redemption 2, which will come to PC eventually. Rockstar would be foolish not to do that. But even then, 52,000 on a platform that has at least 125 million active users, and that is the lowest possible estimate. That's assuming that Steam accounts for the entire market, which we know it doesn't. I mean, the fact that there are about 50 million active players on League of Legends every month, there's no way that all of those people have Steam. I'm sure most of them do, just not all. If the argument is that PC gaming is bad because there aren't any games, that's a factually incorrect statement. And if the argument is that console games are somehow better, I don't see how that's the case. It's just certain individuals want to play those games. Whether or not people want to play a game has no bearing on whether or not it's actually good. Lots of people want to play Call of Duty Ghosts, but that game is terrible. Regardless of the factual merits of this argument, of which there are none, I figured that it would be worthwhile to explain why I feel like the fanboy mentality is so detrimental to the gaming industry. Let's be honest, a fanboy is an irrational person. I don't think there's any way that you could argue otherwise. There's no such thing as a rational fanboy. To be a fanboy, you have to be irrational. I think the clear distinction to make between a fan and a fanboy is usually that the fan likes the product, whereas the fanboy is just enamored and obsessed and fanatical about the company. What you will notice is that a lot of gaming fanboys aren't that big of a fan of the console that they have. It's more that they dislike the other consoles. So, more than anything else, it's driven, their love for a certain company is driven by their hatred for other companies. There's nothing wrong with hating a company. There are plenty of companies that you shouldn't like. And there's nothing wrong with liking a company that does good business practices and helps and is good to their consumer base. But to do so in such an irrational manner, in such a relentless fashion, is just odd. It doesn't make any sense. Pledging blind loyalty to a corporate entity is totally illogical. It benefits you in no tangible way. Unless you're getting paid to shill a company's products, you gain nothing. You're basically just a free cheerleader. Again, there's nothing wrong with liking a product that you genuinely think is good, and I don't think there's anything wrong with telling people, hey, I think this is pretty good, you should give it a shot. But it's when you start doing stupid shit like hating games that are on a platform you don't own, or maybe you own it but you don't like it, and therefore the game itself is bad. The game that PlayStation fanboys are currently hooking their claws into to preach the virtues of is Horizon Zero Dawn, which comes out in a few weeks. Game's not even out yet, but they made up their mind that it's gonna be Game of the Year. This happens all the time and people need to stop it, because every time someone says, oh, this Game of the Year confirmed for a game that isn't even out yet, first question is, have you played it? If you haven't, you can't say that. Man, Gears of War 4 is Game of the Year, confirmed. Oh, so you played it then? Well, no, but I don't need to. You can already see the stupidity in that statement. But anyways, they're leeching into Horizon Zero Dawn. This is the game that they want to hype right now. And that's fine. I mean, the game looks good. I'm not as interested in it now as I was when it was first shown off. A recurring theme with a lot of video games from E3. But I don't think that it's the kind of game that I would want to be hyping up and putting, like, my reputation behind. Because remember, this is Guerrilla Games. They made the Killzone series. You can't bank on them being good in the storytelling department. And honestly, if that leaked cutscene that got leaked on YouTube with Brom is any indication, oh boy. If you haven't seen that cutscene, go on YouTube and look up Horizon Zero Dawn Brom, and you'll see the cutscene, and when you watch it, you will swear that someone like Tommy Wiseau wrote that. I mean, it's funny. It's really funny. The lines are so bad, and the delivery from the guy who's playing this Brom character, it's comedy gold. I love it. But for something that's meant to be like a really serious scene, it certainly is not doing its job. Tangents galore. I'm going on so many tangents. The point that I'm trying to make is, when it comes to these exclusive games, whether it be on PlayStation or Xbox, a thought in the back of my mind with every one of these games is, would you be saying the same thing if it was on the platform that you don't like? You know, would these guys be so hyped for Horizon if it was on the Xbox One? I don't know if they would, and that's a problem. When people don't even trust in your consistency to rate games based on their value as games, as opposed to what piece of plastic they're on, you know you're doing something wrong. You should be liking a game regardless of what platform it's on. The whole point of a platform is it's meant to be a means to play games. That's what a platform is about. It's a means to gain access to games. When the platform comes before the game, your priorities are warped. They're just flat out backwards. They're the inverse of what they should be. People would say that I probably should stop talking to people like this, but I find it fascinating. There are many moments where I've thought, I could do like a full thesis on the fanboy mentality because I find it so fascinating that people think this way. That of all things, video games is where they totally lose the plot. Fanboys in the gaming industry are probably the worst. I mean, barring politics, you know, barring political fanboyism, which is basically just towing the party line and reading the party pamphlet verbatim for every argument you have, console fanboys are next in line as some of the dumbest people I've seen. I could be wrong, of course. I've heard that a lot of TV fandoms are really bad. In some conversations I've had with fans of Doctor Who, they get pissed off at you because you don't know the names of things. Oh, you're so stupid. That's the TARDIS. It's not the telephone box. It's like, come on, man. I haven't watched your show. Cut me some slack. I don't know the names of these things, and don't assume that everybody should know these things. Fanboys definitely will turn you off of whatever they're trying to promote. I'll tell you that much. I kind of had a little bit of interest in watching Steven Universe, but after all of the things I've heard about the fan base pushing a girl who drew an image that they didn't like to the point of nearly killing herself, I don't really feel like watching the show after that. And it's not the fault of the people who made the show either. It's the fault of the fan base for acting like such assholes. You're not doing any favors. You know, you got these Xbox fanboys who act like such idiots over Halo. That's not gonna help people. That's not gonna make people want to go, yeah, you know, I haven't played Halo, but I might give it a shot. It does the opposite of that. You're gonna have people going, nah, fuck that. I give that game a chance. You're a dick. It's detrimental to everybody. Fanboys are detrimental to everybody. So rarely do people do things that basically ruin everything for everyone. Cut it out. Seriously, stop it. Well, that went on longer than I expected. Let's shift the topic to something a little bit more lighthearted. I doubt this will surprise any regular viewers of this podcast, but I have a few nebulous projects in the works for Crude Penguin. Some of them are relatively new ideas and others have been brewing for months now. Currently, the priority for me is a full-length Animal Town comic that I've been working on in one form or another for the past few months, and really I've been trying to come up with ideas for probably over a year at this stage. As it stands, I still haven't technically finished the script. The third act isn't really hanging together how I'd like, and even when I finish the script, then starts the drafting process, and then I can actually start drawing. When it comes to writing, I tend to never be completely happy with the scripts. I'm always second guessing whether or not what I've written is funny, and that in itself can be very delaying in terms of writing something that's purely comedy. You write a serious thing with a little bit of levity and it doesn't really land, you know, whatever, not a big deal. If you're writing a comedy and the comedy doesn't land, then you've totally fucked it up. But at the very least, I can still write stuff even when I'm not thrilled by it and then come back to it later and make improvements. Writer's block, on the other hand, is the fucking worst. There's no fix, and once you have it, progress slams to a halt. I know some people don't believe writer's block is a real thing. You know, they always say, nah, it's just some shit that writers make up because they're lazy. But I can tell you now, anybody who's done some form of creative writing will tell you that writer's block is very real and very annoying. I'd say it happens to pretty much everybody every now and then. I mean, you even hear stories of full writing teams on shows like South Park in the room not being able to come up with ideas. In fact, a fun story, that Woodland Critter Christmas episode of South Park, They didn't figure that one out until about 4 days before the episode needed to be finished and aired. If a team of about 6 to 8 writers encounter writer's block, you can imagine how hard it is for someone who's working on their own. I'd say the productivity of a writer is a bit like a wavelength. Some days you're bursting with ideas and creativity and you can pump out page after page. Some days you can't write a fucking thing, no matter how hard you try. For me, when writer's block crops up, it tends to happen when a script is closing in on completion. Like, for example, I came up with the central story idea for this Animal Town comic, and I was able to get a lot of the work done on it fairly quickly, but now that I'm closing in on completing the first draft, home stretch with the script at least, that's when I'm having more difficulty. When you stop making progress, you tend to lose motivation, which basically exacerbates the problem. I think this is something a lot of people don't appreciate about writing. It's the kind of thing that you can't... When someone's taking too long writing something, you just think, come on, man, what are you doing? Just get it done. But it's not the same as hard production, where you can keep to a deadline, things go wrong, but it's all a very literal process. You're getting things done. Writing is mentally taxing. Production is hard, but writing is mentally taxing. I'm hoping that now that I've vented about my frustrations, I can get off my ass and finish this script. Until I get it done and start production on the issue, I can't really start working on other projects. I'll just keep getting too distracted. I think running Crude Penguin on my own is teaching me a lot about management. If I can only rely on myself, I have to plan accordingly. Personally, I think I've done alright. I've been super consistent on the weekly comics, and this show has been going really strong. Plus, I'm probably going to be releasing Animal Town #1 for free anyway. I can take as long as I like. It's not like Tim Schafer taking everybody's money and releasing half a game. I look at Tim Schafer and go, yeah, I'm not ending up like that. Seriously though, how many projects has that guy mismanaged? It's fascinating that people still give him money, despite going independent and fucking up multiple times. The way I see it, tossing your hard-earned money into a petrol fire is a safer investment than backing a Tim Schafer project. It's about time for the Q&A section. Remember, if you have a question you'd like to ask me, leave it in the comments section and I'll get around to it in the next episode. Today's question comes from Unknown Smile, who asks, what inspired that green character that is you, Mr. Fringy? I know, I'm so striking, aren't I? Around this time last year, I was very dissatisfied with my online persona from a visual sense. Up until that point, my channel art was basically just an F in the middle of the screen, not exactly creative. In fact, I think I did it in about 5 minutes and said, yeah, that's good enough. As such a big fan of cartoons and having recently launched Crude Penguin, I figured that the most appropriate character design would be a minimalistic animated character. Being the contrarian that I am, I wanted to go with a design that was unique and different from what you'd usually see on the internet. On YouTube, the typical avatars you'd see would usually be a caricature of the YouTuber themselves, an avatar that's just a picture of a pre-existing character or IP, which you shouldn't fucking do. I'm just saying that right now. Avoid that shit. Or a cartoon character in a suit. I can't remember exactly why, but I decided to go with a superhero design, and I'm glad I did because I'm very happy with the look even now. And getting me to be happy with something that I made months ago, that is a difficult task, trust me. My suit design was very much inspired by the fully suited superhero look. Characters like Spider-Man, Deadpool, Black Panther, and even Batman to a certain extent were all designs I looked at when crafting my own. At the same time, I wanted to get something somewhat minimalistic, not overly designed. As a cartoon style character, I wanted to have something that didn't really fit that kind of, that animated vibe that you would get from, when you watch like a Justice League DVD movie where they've got really thin lines and realistic proportions, I was going definitely for a cartoon style, so bigger head, thick lines, things like that. Over the course of the year, I wanted to refine the look, partially because people were confused as to what the design was. The original drawing was pretty bad. I don't know how I came up with it, but the first one I did, the very first one, which looked terrible, it looked awful. I just banged it out in like 2 minutes and said, yeah, I'll work on this next time. And then I did. And it was fine for the time, but there were issues with it. I didn't like the look of the head. It was a mismatch with the current style that I had because the head was conjoined to the neck. It kind of stuck out. It didn't look like a person, or at least the way that I draw them. And some of the eyes were very rigid because they were basically just circles that I made shapes out of. as opposed to proper drawings. My current suit design now incorporates a few visual elements that more appropriately indicate what I'm supposed to be. There are the shoulder pads, the gloves, there's a utility belt, and a chest strap for my patented electric sword. Most creative name ever. There's actually a story behind that sword. I put a lot of thought into like, what will the signature weapon be? And hopefully we'll be able to explore that when I get around to doing a Fringy comic. I've been talking about this for a long time. I gotta do it. And I've been coming up with lots of ideas for a sidekick character. It started off a little bit simplistic, but I think I've got a cool idea. I just gotta work on it. And that's basically the story of my character design. I really like that question because I got to talk about myself for about 5 minutes. I'm just kidding, I actually hate myself. What a happy note to end on. Well, that does it for me for this episode. Thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed this and you want to see more, feel free to visit crudepenguin.com and also like the Twitter and Facebook page. All of the links are in the description. I missed the comic last week, but hopefully I'll have a good one up this week, even though I also haven't done it yet. I'm very punctual at the moment, aren't I? Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you in the next episode of the Cynical Den Podcast.